And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. More than 2,500 years ago, Hippocrates said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." Nutritional status of an individual is affected by several factors such as age, sex, health status, lifestyle, and medications. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1989.
Everywhere we turn today, there are promises of a new, slimmer, healthier you. Walking through any supermarket, we are inundated by books and magazines, each claiming to have the secret to achieving a youthful, vibrant body. Some methods almost sound easy and fun. But if that's the case, then why are 7 million Canadians overweight and out of shape? According to the nutritionist at the Skeena Health Unit, there are no shortcuts. Sonia Kupka says fad diets and quick weight loss schemes simply don't work for most people. Whether you're struggling to lose unwanted pounds or just want to live a healthier lifestyle, Sonia says the same basic diet rules apply. Lots of fresh fruit and vegetables, keep the fat content down, and include plenty of carbohydrates and fiber in your daily regime. Sounds straightforward enough, but as any diet-conscious shopper knows, there are pitfalls at every turn of the supermarket aisle. To find out just what to avoid and what to look for in our quest for a slim, healthy body, Sonia took us on a tour of a local supermarket, starting with what she calls the real diet section.
Fresh fruits and vegetables and salads in particular are really packed full of vitamins and minerals, and as well they can be really satisfying. They make you feel good. And at the same time, they tend to be low in calories, provided what you have with them. And what kind of dressings. Yeah, right. That's the killer.
Are there some things in the produce section that you should avoid, though?
There's some that you have to be a bit careful with if you're concerned about calories, in that some are a lot more condensed, whether they be high in fat, like avocados, or if they may be a bit more concentrated in simple sugars, such as apples are actually quite concentrated, or grapes. They tend to be a bit higher in calories. But there's still a good selection because they're high in lots of vitamins as well.
The guideline for choosing fruits and vegetables seems to be the higher the water content, the lower the calories and sugar. Things like lettuce, mushrooms, melons, cucumbers, and tomatoes.
And they're a great filler for sandwiches as well. So if you want to cut down on some of the other fillers on the sandwiches, such as the meat and the cheese that tend to be higher in calories, again, filling it up with the tomatoes will stretch your sandwich and still have a nice hearty size that can be satisfying.
Sounds good too.
Yeah. And that's what the bean sprouts are a good choice for as well.
Also.
And the alfalfa sprouts, right.
So there are a number of things in the produce section that really have hardly any calories at all.
That's right. And they add a lot of flavor. For example, onions. You wouldn't want to have a lot of them, but just to add flavor and to spice something up, they're a really good selection.
What about the vegetables that we traditionally think of that we should avoid? Things like potatoes.
Potatoes in themselves are not that high a source of calories. There's an excellent source of vitamin C, and I think they tend to be avoided because they're in that carbohydrate group that people are really frightened of. But if you have a potato, it rounds off a nice meal, and it can be very filling as well, and it's a reasonable source of fiber in the same point. And so it's actually what you put on the potatoes and on the squash that can run into problems if you're trying to watch your weight.
We then move on to one of my favorites, the dairy section. All those delicious cheeses that are so good for you. But Sonia warns that although dairy products are a great source of calcium, they are also high in calories. Most cheeses contain about 30% milk fat.
Then that tends to be a very concentrated form of calories.
So you really can't afford to eat a lot of cheese.
No, and if you replace the meat in your diet by cheese, some of the beef is actually as low as 7% fat, whereas the cheese, the cheddar cheese, for example, the regular kind, is 30%. One alternative is to go for one of the cheeses that are made from a skim milk. For example, a lot of the mozzarellas now, they have only 15% milk fat. If you look at the label, all the cheeses are required to have the percent of milk fat on it. This one here says 15% milk fat, whereas if you pick up this small piece of cheddar here,
that's a whopping piece.
is 31%.
31%
milk fat and only 39% moisture, whereas this one here is 52% moisture.
Okay,
So as the moisture goes up, the milk fat goes down.
so it's similar to what we look for in our milk. 2%
Exactly.
whole milk, 1%. When it comes to counting calories, low-fat alternatives like ricotta and cottage cheese are the best. Although yogurt too is seen as a traditional diet food, Sonia says to watch out for added sugar in the flavored brands. And when it comes to all dairy products, the rule of thumb is the skimmer, the better. Aim for the lowest percentage of milk fat possible without offending your taste buds.
In our diet, we do tend to have too high a fat diet. Canadians have about 40% fat in their diet, and the recommendation is 30%. And one easy way to cut down is in the milk, if you can tolerate the taste. However, if a person finds skim milk unappealing to drink, 2% is not that bad an alternative. Homogenized milk is fairly, one step further, that perhaps going in the midline, or now they have 1%.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Beef, it gets a bad rap. While it can be unhealthy to eat too much fatty red meat, lean red meat does not raise your cholesterol and contains nutrients like protein, vitamin B12, iron, niacin, and zinc. Let us return to the archives as Sonia shares what to look for when selecting meat cuts.
On to the meat department, where many of us tend to go overboard, especially during the summer months when barbecued steaks and hamburgers are standard fare. Probably, first of all, people do tend to think, well, if I'm on a diet or just for good healthy eating, I would want to avoid a lot of red meat. Is that true?
I don't think that we have to completely avoid it, but previously we certainly did consume too much beef. If you're looking at a portion size, you only need 2 to 3 ounces, and that isn't a lot, and that will give a bit more satisfaction to the meal, and it tends to be a bit more filling. A lot of it is the choice of meat that's actually taken. If you look at ground beef now, it comes in 3 different levels. Regular, which is about 30% fat, down to lean, which I believe is, 23, and the very extra lean is only 7% fat, which is very low. It's actually lower than something, for example, like chicken with skin on.
Although it costs more, the leaner meat is Sonia's preference, especially if the portion size can be cut down.
If you're only looking at a 2-3 ounce size portion, that's fine, but if you go to a restaurant, quite often you'll have something 6 to 8 ounces easily.
And most people don't think of 2 to 3 ounces as a fair portion of meat.
No, it can be. 3 ounces is approximately the size of a deck of cards, and that's not generally the size that we look at.
However, one way to eliminate some of our meat consumption is to increase the carbohydrates, such as pasta, breads, and potatoes.
All those are low-fat alternatives. They're high in nutrients if you go for the whole grains, and they're also very low cost.
And as for another one of North America's favorite meat products, well, Sonia doesn't have much good to say about bacon.
No, bacon is, it sometimes tends to be a well-thought-of breakfast item. It's very high in fat. Just looking at it, you can see that the majority of it is fat, and to consider this a meat selection is actually almost inappropriate because it's got so little protein on it compared to the fat that it's not a fair choice. But again, if you're looking at a Sunday brunch and you have 2 slices of bacon, that's not a concern. But what previously happened is it would be the standard bacon and eggs every morning, and it would be 6 to 8 slices of bacon, and that's getting excessive.
Down the aisle a little further, we find some good diet food from the sea. Fish is generally pretty low in calories, although the fat content does vary depending on the species.
Salmon, we have this wonderful looking coho salmon, does tend to be a fattier fish as compared to fillet of sole. However, the benefits of the fat in the fish are becoming more and more substantiated in that there is a certain ingredient in the fish oil that seems to have an effect of decreasing heart disease. And there's a lot of interesting studies that have come out from that. So while it may be a higher fat alternative, there are beneficial effects to it as well. The main thing with fish, I think, is the method of preparation. That's where the fat tends to come into it, and that a lot of people enjoy frying their fish, and then you get into a higher, whereas something such as braising or poaching, baking it, that sort of things are a better way to prepare it.
Next, we head into the frozen food aisle, a popular spot for the avid dieter with a wide selection of prepared low-cal dinners. Sonia says there's nothing really wrong with the light meals, But the one thing you're paying for is portion control, a fairly steep price for a convenient and small frozen gourmet dinner.
The other thing, though, about the more frozen foods, and they tend to be highly processed, is that they're getting very high in sodium content. You know, any of them, when you, no matter which brand you get to, you tend to, for the preservation point of view, they have to add a lot of sodium, and that, of course, is going to enhance the flavors.
This is not something that you would buy, though, is it?
No, because I think that some of the best fast foods are actually around the perimeter of the store. If you look for grabbing some quick noodles and a fish which can cook in 15 minutes, then that's my idea of a fast food. And you get back to the natural source. It's less expensive. And there's the satisfaction of preparing it as well.
So a lot of people, they feel this is more convenient. They feel it's quicker because maybe they can throw it in their microwave and it's done in a couple of minutes. But what you're saying is that if people just looked a little harder, they don't have to be a great cook to be able to cook naturally and quickly.
No, that's right. It takes a bit of practice to get things down pat. I think the key thing is actually to start off by getting the groceries, to have a fridge full of things, and to have alternatives to choose from and to combine from. Once you have that standard full fridge to start off with, it makes cooking a lot easier. And it can make it quicker as well.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
An increasing number of adults feel the grave concern that comes when the physician tells them that even moderate overweight is dangerous. Is there a practical way to lose unwanted pounds? Devising an effective reducing diet is the basic step in any program of weight reduction through diet. Doctors and scientists, applying their knowledge of nutrition, physiology, and human nature, formulate low-calorie diets of everyday foods that give a high return in nutrition and satisfaction.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Nutrition labeling guidelines were introduced in Canada in 1988, along with amendments to the Food and Drug Regulations, including a process that started in 1983. The system was voluntary with a few exceptions. The guidelines along nutritional labeling govern format, nutritional content, information, and the declaration of serving size. Let us return to the archives as Sonia shares what to look for on a nutritional label.
On our way to look at cereals, we breezed down the candy and pop aisle without making a stop. No explanation needed here. Better just to avoid it altogether. The best choices in cereal are high in fiber without additives. Cereals like rolled oats or oat bran. Granola is usually lumped into that category. However, most brands are loaded with sugar and are high in fat content.
So while they're a very tasty alternative and they're almost a dessert, they're not a good choice for the person that's watching their diet. In the whole area of cereals as well, there's the benefits of the high fiber content, such as the natural bran, which is a good source of fiber. And then there's the effects of the oat bran, which is the new one out that has the interesting effects on the blood cholesterol, that given large quantities, by large quantities about a quarter of a cup a day, it has been shown to decrease the blood cholesterol.
And at the bottom of the list are the cereals where sugar is one of the main ingredients. So when in doubt, Sonia says, check the side of the box.
Flaked milled corn, and then the second ingredient is sugar, and or glucose fructose, more sugar. Malt flavoring, which is again more sugar. So you're getting it from a variety of sources. Some of them will have honey in it. Anything that has O's at the end of it, OSE, tends to be a form of sugar that's added to it. If you get the dried fruits that are added, they tend to be quite concentrated in sugars as well, but they do have nutrients that go with it.
So when it comes to cereals, you really need to know what you're doing.
Reading the labels is important. Reading the labels is really important, and you do want to get a cereal that is going to give you lots of nutrients for the energy that comes along with it.
In addition to the sugar, some cereals contain a liberal dose of coloring as well. Moving along to canned fruits, Sonia once again suggests looking at the list of contents, since many fruits are canned in heavy syrup.
For example, this cocktail here is in a syrup, and so the ingredients are peaches, water, pears, grapes, corn syrup, which is essentially sugar. Then it goes on pineapple, sugar, more sugar, and then it even has food coloring in it. A better choice would be to go for something that is in its own juice, canned in its own juice, something on it that specifically says no sugar added, or something in pear juice as well. That's a low sugar alternative. Some of the products, for example, cherries tend to be notoriously in a heavy syrup. Now they are coming out with light syrup, which is a better alternative.
When it comes to dressing those salads, our expert says low-cal is the way to go if you want to cut down on fat intake.
It may not have the same satiety effect in that it's going to be lower in fat, but the flavor will certainly be there, and it'll spruce up the salad to give it a bit of extra zing to it.
Low-calorie dressings are also cheaper because much of the oil is replaced with water. Many people watching their weight feel bread products must be cut out, but Sonia says they are a good source of carbohydrates and fiber as long as you know what to look for.
We all know that we should be eating whole wheat or whole grains. The thing that I've noticed a lot with the kinds of products, bread products, are they have really healthy sounding names and they're dark in color, but they aren't necessarily all that great.
Right, there is a difference between brown bread and whole wheat. Just because it's brown doesn't necessarily mean it's whole wheat. And even once you get into a whole wheat bread, there is a variety. This one, for example, is 60% whole wheat. Some of them go on to 80%, and then there's some that are 100% as well. And if you're starting off at the enriched white bread, it might be a very good step in between to move on to something that's only 60%. In that if you go straight to the 100%, it might be a bit unacceptable, either flavor or digestion-wise.
But I've noticed a lot of these breads with granola and bran and all that also have a lot of honey and molasses and in some cases brown sugar.
That's right. They are starting to have more and more substances added to it, and so in that way, of course, they're going to be higher in calories, and it might be something to watch for.
So what should we be looking for then? What's a good bread?
Looking for 100% whole wheat, and any of them, as soon as you get into the 100% whole wheat, that don't have a lot of additional things added to it in the form of honey, in the form of brown sugar.
There's no question, nutrition is a hot topic these days. Information on health, vitamins, dieting, and exercise has become commonplace. There is good information readily available for those who want to learn more. For example, the Canada Safeway Nutrition Awareness Centre offers a variety of health facts free of charge. But when it comes to the plethora of health and exercise magazines found on newsstands across the country, Sonia urges people to be discriminating and don't believe everything you read. So how do you know what to believe when there are so many diet and exercise plans to choose from? What is the best way to lose weight?
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
In the early 1900s, overweight businessman Horace Fletcher slimmed down and made dieting a pop culture phenomenon with his chewing diet. Fletcher believed that prolonged chewing precluded overeating, led to better systemic and dental health, helped reduce food intake, and consequently conserved money. In this final segment of Open Connection, Sonia shares some pitfalls to avoid when dieting.
When you're looking at if you want to go to a prescribed weight loss diet and seek outside help, per se, one of the first things to look at is, do they suggest that you have a varied diet, including foods that you normally eat and enjoy? You don't want to have to take out all the foods you enjoy, otherwise chances are you won't be able to stick on it. Does it include all 4 food groups? And does it meet the recommended number of portions in each of them? Does it encourage increasing your activity? Does it encourage that you consult with your doctor prior to going on to a weight loss diet? Does it rely on supplements to provide all the nutrients you need, or does it rely on foods? Of course, you're looking to getting your nutrients through foods, and there's no need to resort actually to supplements.
So you wouldn't have approved of the diet that Oprah went on?
No, I wouldn't give that one my blessing. There's quite a few things that she was missing in that way. And it'll be interesting to see how long she actually keeps the weight off of. If you're not looking at actually changing habits and making a lot of small changes, chances are you won't be able to stick to it. That's why we really encourage a slow weight loss of just 1 to 2 pounds a week, so a half to a kilogram a week. And chances are that will be it'll be easier to maintain that sort of weight loss.
Can you pick out some of the ones that you'd really tell people to avoid?
Any kind of diet that suggests that you completely avoid a certain food or a food group, such as if there's a diet that says you eliminate all dairy products, then that's a real concern because you're missing a major nutrient, specifically calcium. As well, any diets that promise you very quick results in a large weight loss over a short period of time, chances are what you're losing there is you're losing water, not fat, and that's going to happen.
Some people would rather cut out eating altogether for quick results, but our nutritionist says fasting is not really an effective route to take.
It's extremely deceptive. You may see an immediate weight loss just for the reason that, of course, you're not consuming and you'll tend to have a lot of water loss along with it. But that's when you get into the yo-yo syndrome, where you see a drastic weight loss. What your body does is it thinks that it's starving. And so automatically these mechanisms tend to set in, and the body tries to preserve itself and it tries to avoid losing excessive weight. And then at the time when you start consuming regular amounts again, it doesn't know when the next meal is going to come. Previously it was starved, and then all of a sudden it gets a large amount of food, and so it's going to tend to store that a lot easier.
So actually fasting it tends to, your body inhibits burning up of calories.
That's right, your body would tend to store the fat a lot easier.
And fad diets just don't work.
Unfortunately, no. I mean, if it was that easy to lose weight, we would not have 7 million Canadians that are overweight.
With that many people in the overweight but undernourished category, there's an obvious need for some lifestyle changes among Canadians. However, people need to know when enough is enough. Our preoccupation with body image and a youthful appearance can do more harm than good.
Some people are thinking that they're overweight, whereas really they're not. They're at a healthy weight. I think that we've gotten, just judging by some of the magazines we were looking at and some of the shapes you see on them, we've lost perspective as to what is a healthy weight and what is a healthy body.
Do you think that this trend now, though, is that people, they're aiming for something that is not healthy, being, in most cases, either very muscular or very thin? Is it too extreme?
It certainly is. We're looking at a lot of eating disorders that are coming out in the form of anorexia and bulimia, and they have a lot of horrible, horrible consequences. And as well, I think one thing that isn't measured that easily is just the dissatisfaction that tends to be generated, the unhappiness that a lot of people are coming from their current body shapes, whereas they might be at quite a fine body shape. They're at the weight that they tend to be maintained at best, and yet they're made to feel uncomfortable because of the images that are put forward in magazines, in media, around circles of friends.
So we should be able to be just a little bit chubbier and be a little bit happier.
That's right. I mean, looking back in the Renaissance days and the forms that were considered beautiful at that time as opposed to what's now, I think that hopefully, and we've gone away from the very severe twiggy image, and we're starting to see a bit more shapes in the form of muscles. And also, I think even if you look at the models, they tend to have a bit higher body fat than they did for perhaps 3 to 5 years ago.
In the final analysis, there's no easy way to get around the diet game. There are no shortcuts, and the bottom line is to eat the right foods, lower the fat intake, and expend more calories than you consume. And in the meantime, maybe the trend towards a more full-figured body will gain momentum and become the new look of the 90s.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.